Alright, so this is going to be a review for X-Men The Extinction Agenda. This is the 1990 crossover that they did in between X-Factor, Uncanny X-Men, and New Mutants. And this sort of kicked off the crossovers that took place within the X-Men each year, or if not each year, every other year following that. In all honesty, this is not the first X-Men crossover that's been done, because back in the 80s that they had Mutant Massacre, Fall of the Mutants, and the Inferno stories. Those were crossovers in itself, but what set this one apart and actually kind of became the blueprint is the fact that you had different X teams all in the crossover, but this is the first time that they were actually working against a common goal, and that they were all featured in each other's stories. So this is pretty cool. Basically what happens in this story, and if my voice kind of sounds a little jumpy, I have a little cold right now, or a little twitchy, so you'll have to excuse that. Excuse me. But basically the background on the story is that back on the original Genosha story in Uncanny 246 through 251, I believe it was, this government has gained national attention. It's off the eastern coast of Africa, and they've gained national attention because they're a completely technologically advanced society that dictates that humans and mutants live together in peace. And if you are a mutant oppressed somewhere and you want to live a good life, hey, come over here and we'll take care of you. And that's the cover story they project to the world, and that's even how they proclaim it on the news at night. So it's got a lot of things going for it. It's kind of like China saying, like, everything's fine, don't question nothing. And it's also a total police state. But what the secret is behind that is that the fact that they have brainwashed the mutants and they're using them as slave labor to keep, like, power going on the island. If somebody's injured, or at least humans are injured, you have healers. And this story could be a conspiracy theorist love, because like the type of society that they're always are afraid of is prevalent within the stories. Total 1984 going on, at least in one location. The fact is also that people are determined where their station in life is by their genetics. If they test positive for a mutant, it doesn't matter who you are. Even if you're like in the case of the son of the genetic engineer on the island, who they call the Gene Engineer, his girlfriend was found out to be a mutant, and because the girl's father swapped her out for somebody else, even like the child of a person in high rank, or anybody that he loves or is friends with, is not safe from this. So even political connections will not get you out of trouble. And it's eventually him turning on his father that ultimately winds up bringing the Genoshan government. They lost a good bit of their slave labor, but there were a lot of mutants that still didn't revolt against it, and this is sort of the sequel to it. Well, the president of Genosha is entirely furious over what happened, and she actually orchestrates, along with Cameron Hodge, who recently has gained his new cybernetic body, attempts to kidnap the X-Men and bring them to the island for purposes of making slave labor. Now, the Gene Engineer wants to use them for slave labor. The president wants to use them for slave labor. Cameron Hodge just wants to wipe them the fuck out, but apparently they have this common goal. They want to get rid of mutants, so he's going to kidnap mutants and bring them there and torture them for his own personal amusement. And especially in the fact that Hodge has a big beef with Archangel in particular. Apparently there was a backstory that Hodge and Warren Worthington III were college roommates, and he was like their best friend, and he stood by them and all that. And there was the secret that Hodge was actually the head of this anti-mutant group who was called the Right. Um, they found out about his betrayal, defeated him, and he went to this demon who gave him immortality. Archangel fought him, cut his head off, and then Hodge's followers put his head onto this giant robotic spider body, and that's pretty much how it wound up that way. So, like, whatever you saw from the Phalanx saga that was done in the 90s series, totally forget that. This is the actual origin of Cameron Hodge's condition. There were 4 mutants that were kidnapped by the Genosian government and teleported back there and put under the brainwashing. Storm, who, I can't remember why, but for some reason her body has regressed back to that of a young teenager's. I think she's still got a little bit of her memories intact, but her powers are acting like they first manifested themselves, and they're entirely out of control. And they also kidnapped Richter, Wolfsbane, and Boom Boom from the New Mutants. And I think the story, besides being a huge crossover, besides being the first crossover and the first major status quo that constantly changed things with the X-Men, this is also the first one that would introduce X-Force the following year, based upon who swaps out from which teams and whatnot. And that's really cool. Cable is in this story. He's pretty badass. In fact, everybody in the story actually has something to contribute. Even if they're powerless, you still have Boom Boom and Richter, who have been trained under Cable, and they pretty much know how to kick ass before they're put under the knife. Jubilee. I think the one big thing that stands out to the story in me is what they did with Jubilee. They even found a use for her in this. She doesn't have the greatest powers, but you know, when the situation calls for it, she'll know how to use it. And that training and like the big pep talk that Wolverine gives her is the big brother type. This is good stuff that they know what to do with Jubilee. It was always my major complaint. They brought her in, but they really did nothing with her. This story, she actually does get to do something, and it's great. I do have 2 criticisms with the story. One has to do with the art, and one has to do with some powers, which I'll get to shortly. The first thing I'll talk about is the art. Jim Lee does art in this. You can tell by looking at it, it's awesome. Rob Liefeld does some art in this, and it looks awesome. Yes, I said that. See, the thing was, I know Rob Liefeld is one of the most hated artists in comics right now because he still draws like he's in the 90s. But back when he drew his stuff in the 90s, it worked. If anything, I probably have to say that John Bogdanove, who did the art for New Mutants, leaves a little something to be desired, but you know, it's still alright. The other complaint that I have to bring up in this, you know, there are kind of other smaller complaints that they bring up in this, like, you know, Jean Grey's back in this and all that. And then Havoc, who was kidnapped in the original Genosian story arc, and he works as a amnesic foot soldier, and him and Scott, or every time that Scott sees his brother, he tries to do something to snap him out of his memories. The 2 criticisms that I have to do with Havoc are, one, he was captured by the Genosian government, but apparently for some reason they didn't say if his powers would cancel out or they couldn't control him or whatever. Basically all the mutants in this are the Lycans from Underworld, and Havoc is Lucian. But they took his memory, but they left his powers intact. I don't know if they could trust him or what, but basically he's their anti-mutant police. And in the times that Havoc and Cyclops actually do throw down with their powers in the story, it's revealed that either because they're mutants and they're brothers, or the fact that their powers are so similar in some ways, they can cancel each other out, and you know, Cyclops could get hit full on by Havoc's powers and vice versa, and it really wouldn't hurt him all that much. they don't really explain this that much to me. But the fights that the brothers do have are pretty good. And then we have like 2 New Mutants that are killed in the story. And it kind of, sets up a lot of character development in the others, especially in Wolfsbane. And this is actually the story arc in which she gains her the lupine form that she has majority of the times from now on in the comics. This is where she gets that. A lot of good things happen in this story. It's a little slow to get into in the long run, but the different writers and the artists and character development, action, totally all around great story from the 90s. I would say recommend picking this up. Really worth it.